Uzbekistan has the power to become a regional titan in Central Asia, with its quickly growing economy and vast population outnumbering every one of its neighbors. Its potential for hegemony is unparalleled. People know very little about Uzbekistan, but its importance is becoming more and more noticeable as China builds out its Belt and Road Initiative. Uzbekistan is emerging as the central powerhouse to the whole plan. Bordering every country in Central Asia, it is the key to unifying the Eastern and Western markets to maximize global trade to its full potential. On the most overlooked part of the world lies a sleeping mammoth, Uzbekistan, a region historically controlled and prioritized by the largest empires of history, has lay dormant since the fall of the Soviet Union, but in the silence it has been secretly growing in importance, and now has the ingredients to become a regional behemoth. Here's why. The population of Uzbekistan has been exploding. It has a young and mobile population with an average age of 27. Young people have been moving out of rural areas to find better work in the cities like Kashmir and Namangan. The young population is a big force in driving economic growth, and this is clearly shown in data. Uzbekistan was one of the only nations to have their economy grow in the virus, and every single year for the past 5 they have been growing at faster rates than India and China. However, it's not all sunshine and rainbows for Uzbekistan. They have a number of challenges they are going to have to face as a nation, their big challenge being the influence of Putin. Uzbekistan has an awful relationship with Russia, and really hates their continuing exerted influence on Central Asia. Russia has troops stationed in ally Kyrgyzstan who intervened in an Uzbek-Kyrgyz disagreement in 2010 over farming rights. Of the 5 Central Asian nations, Uzbekistan is the most anti-Russian. Putin has tried to crack down on this to maintain the Russian sphere of influence over Central Asia. However, in the last year, with Russia fully focused on the Ukraine war, it has spiked, with Uzbekistan trying to move as far away from Russia as possible. But this may be costing them in a way you might not expect. Water scarcity. Uzbekistan has had a huge problem with lack of water in recent years. As one of the largest exporters of cotton global, lots of water is used in farming and more recently sustaining the huge population boom. Neighboring Kyrgyzstan and Tajikistan have plenty of upstream rivers that flow down through Uzbekistan. However, those nations are building dams upstream to limit supply. Russia is also supporting these projects financially to help gain further control over Uzbekistan and using it as a geopolitical linchpin. This tension between Tajikistan, Kyrgyzstan, and Uzbekistan dates all the way back to the Soviet Union days. When Stalin drew the borders up, he deliberately made them as nonsensical as possible to reduce the chance of revolution as much as possible. He tried to actively make the countries the least organized and cohesive as it could be. So when the Union fell, that left these individual states with terrible borders that make just no sense. The majority of the Uzbekistan population is living in the Fergana Valley, just over the other side of the mountain from the capital city Tashkent. However, the natural route up and down the valley to the rest of Uzbekistan is cut off as it goes into Tajikistan territory, and the alternative route goes all the way through the mountains. This obviously makes no sense, and Uzbeks regularly go through the Tajik territory. However, this puts the two governments at huge standoffs, at times causing major tension, whereas the logical solution is to trade some territory so that the natural route into the valley comes into Uzbek land. But the governments cannot agree, so tensions remain. What is perhaps a greater challenge for Uzbekistan, though, is its lack of identity. Modern Uzbek life is a strange mix of American-style consumerism, hallmarks to the past under Soviet rule, and the influence of the majority Islamic population following a more Turkic-style life. And as a result, there is no distinct Uzbek identity, which is a problem if you want to form a nationalistic conquering society like Uzbekistan is heading towards in the next few decades. But how is Uzbekistan going to overcome these setbacks? Well, the golden rule for Uzbekistan to become a majorly rich nation in the decades to come is international relations. Uzbekistan is geographically blessed in the sense that it is in between all 4 of the major population and power centers of the world. It is in between China, Russia, India, and the US, meaning that geographically it is the central land to control for forging an empire that in China's case goes into Europe and in America's case expands into Asia. If Uzbekistan plays its foreign policy correctly, it could become a major part of Cold War 2.0 geopolitics between China and America. What Uzbekistan needs to do from here is to make friends with Russia and set aside their differences, become besties with the Chinese and take their money for infrastructure and economic growth in exchange for becoming the gateway of the Belt and Road Initiative and China's entry into Europe, and restore relationships with the Americans in order to extract investment out of American companies, especially with the arms industry. If Uzbekistan plays both sides this way, it could become immensely influential by the incoming financial and political aid that would be poured into the nation. If the Chinese Communist Party flooded their full gates of investment attributed to the Belt and Road scheme into infrastructure in Uzbekistan, Uzbekistan would triple in geopolitical strategic value overnight, causing the Americans to want to invest in the country, to try to counteract the investment and influence of the Belt and Road as much as humanly possible, causing this vicious back and forth of Chinese investment into its gateway to the Middle East and Europe, and America's counteracting force to that. And if Uzbekistan plays both sides well enough, it gets everybody's investment money and infrastructure and builds itself into a wealthy nation and has regional hegemony over Central Asia. If Uzbekistan were to follow this strategy and gain wealth through their geostrategic value from both sides of the Cold War, it could then move to be a regional dominator. Firstly, with heightened wealth and nationalism, it could move to secure all ethnic Uzbeks be under one nation, as there are millions of Uzbeks in North Afghanistan, Turkmenistan, and Tajikistan. If Uzbekistan gets Russia and China on side and conveniently turn a blind eye, we could see Uzbekistan look to invade these small territories and occupy them to form a larger Uzbek state. This makes sense topographically for Uzbekistan to expand into the very large and flat salt plains to the north in the fairly unpopulated region of southern Kazakhstan, and expand into the regions with already large Uzbek majorities. Looking to history, the modern Uzbekistan region has always been controlled by either large empires or smaller states like the one seen today. Another correlation we also see is that in history, when the Kazakhs are strong and in imperial phases, they tend to dominate and rule over the Uzbeks towards the south. However, the Uzbeks control much of the north when the Kazakhs become weak, that is when either isn't under the same huge empire, and we can clearly see this cycle of history turning again in favor of the Uzbeks. So if history repeats, we will likely see Uzbekistan move to control much of what is today southern Kazakhstan. Ultimately, the future looks bright for Uzbekistan. It is a rising star in a region of weakling powers. If it can forge good connections with strategic allies and play its war profiteering game correctly, it could find itself at the helm of the new world as the G of Central Asia and have hegemony over the region. Now find out why India is becoming a puppet to China, or why Mexico will become insanely rich. And if you've learned something from this video, then subscribe to learn more.